Around 45,000 years ago, people reached the Rani's Cave region during one of Europe's colder periods. These humans belonged to Homo, a species that first evolved in much warmer climates. That raises a difficult question, because tropical primates should struggle in freezing winters. Yet archaeological evidence shows they repeatedly occupied places that experienced severe seasonal cold. The obvious answer is fire, but fire alone could never solve the entire problem. A campfire warms nearby air, but freezing wind quickly steals that warmth away. Survival depended on combining many small advantages instead of trusting one miraculous invention. Each advantage reduced danger, and together they transformed impossible winters into survivable seasons. However, this does not explain everything because warmth constantly escaped from the human body. To understand why, first imagine the body as a living source of heat. Your body survives cold only when it creates heat faster than the environment removes it. Wind, wetness, and frozen ground all speed up heat loss for different reasons. Wet clothing is especially dangerous because water carries heat away much faster than trapped air. That is why staying dry could matter as much as finding another log. Cold surfaces also drain warmth whenever skin or thin clothing presses against them. Even a small insulating layer can dramatically slow that invisible energy transfer. But where did those protective layers actually come from in the first place? The answer begins with careful preparation rather than simple hunting success. A useful hide required time, skill, and repeated maintenance after the hunt ended. That preparation turned a dead animal into months of future protection. Now the mystery shifts from body heat to the technologies surrounding that heat. Those technologies often looked simple, yet every detail affected survival. Layered hides worked because trapped air resisted heat movement better than solid material alone. The goal was not thicker clothing alone, but smarter insulation. Stone scrapers helped remove unwanted tissue before hides could properly dry. Drying reduced decay and prepared the material for additional treatment. Strong sinew fibers could bind different pieces together before woven thread became common. Bone awls punched neat holes that made stitching easier and more reliable. Eyed needles appeared later in prehistory and allowed finer fitted garments in some regions. Good clothing conserved precious body heat before the first spark ever reached the firewood. But even excellent clothing failed if freezing wind slipped through every gap. That naturally leads to another question, because where people lived mattered just as much. Warm clothing protected the traveler, but shelter protected the warmth itself. Insulation always worked best when clothing and shelter supported each other together. The challenge was never defeating winter completely, but reducing its power every single day. Now attention shifts from what people wore to where they chose to stop. Why was a cave useful even before anyone lit a fire inside? Solid rock blocked wind that otherwise carried body heat away remarkably quickly. However, caves were not automatically comfortable or even safe places to occupy. Some caves stayed damp, while others allowed freezing drafts through hidden openings. Choosing the right location inside the shelter became another survival decision. People also built windbreaks where natural rock alone was not enough. Simple barriers often mattered more than impressive-looking structures. Archaeology preserves some shelter traces, although many temporary materials disappeared long ago. That uncertainty reminds us not every successful shelter survives in the archaeological record. Once the wind slowed, careful fire placement became much more effective. A poorly placed hearth wasted fuel instead of warming the living space. Stone surfaces could reflect some radiant heat back toward nearby people. Fire was essential, but keeping it alive demanded constant attention. Fresh flames are dramatic, yet glowing embers often mattered even more. Relighting from preserved embers usually required less effort than starting completely again. Fuel collection therefore became a regular chore instead of an occasional emergency. Dry wood burned more efficiently because less energy first evaporated trapped moisture. Finding dry fuel after snowfall sometimes required planning well before the storm arrived. But fire solved only part of the body's energy problem. Even beside a warm hearth, the body still needed fuel from food. That connection explains why winter hunting mattered far beyond filling empty stomachs. The next challenge was producing enough internal heat through reliable nutrition. Without sufficient calories, every other survival strategy became less effective. Winter survival always depended on managing both energy outside the body and inside it. Why did winter meals need far more energy than comfort alone might suggest? Producing body heat requires calories, which are units of food energy. Fat provided especially concentrated energy that could support long cold days. Marrow hidden inside large bones also offered valuable nutrition after successful hunts. Nothing useful was casually wasted when food could determine survival. However, finding food was only the beginning of another difficult challenge. How could valuable food last through days when hunting failed completely? Drying removed moisture that many microorganisms need to multiply rapidly. Cold weather itself sometimes helped preserve food when temperatures remained consistently low. Smoking exposed food to gentle heat and would smoke over extended periods. Researchers continue debating exactly how common each preservation method was across different regions. Evidence varies because many preserved foods disappear long before archaeologists can discover them. People could also cache supplies by placing them in carefully chosen protected locations. Stored resources reduced risk whenever weather prevented immediate hunting success. Food planning therefore extended survival beyond the outcome of one successful day. But surviving winter demanded cooperation as much as careful preparation. Why could sleeping near other people make such a meaningful difference overnight? Nearby bodies reduced heat loss by sharing warmth within the sheltered space. Shared labor also divided demanding winter tasks across the entire group. No single individual needed to accomplish every essential job alone. Seasonal movement also reduced exposure to the harshest conditions whenever possible. Routes often followed reliable water, familiar landmarks, and predictable animal movements. Planning ahead could prevent dangerous surprises before winter storms arrived. But here is the problem because cold injuries sometimes developed despite careful planning. Frozen tissue can suffer lasting damage when blood flow becomes severely restricted. Wet clothing increased danger because it accelerated heat loss throughout the body. Drying clothing quickly after exposure became another everyday survival routine. Human biology can gradually adjust somewhat to repeated cold exposure through acclimatization. However, biological acclimatization never replaced clothing, shelter, food, and careful planning. Together, these strategies allowed ordinary days to continue through extraordinary winters. Their success came from many dependable habits rather than one extraordinary breakthrough. Those combined habits prepared people for the changing conditions waiting beyond each season. The same physical rules still govern every cold weather expedition today. Modern insulated clothing still works mainly by trapping pockets of air. Outdoor survival guides continue warning that wet clothing rapidly increases danger. Experienced mountaineers also protect themselves by blocking wind whenever possible. High-energy food remains essential because cold still demands additional body heat. Weather forecasts now replace careful sky watching, yet the underlying decision stays familiar. Technology improves safety, but it cannot repeal the laws of heat transfer. A later example appears with the 5,300-year-old Iceman discovered in the Alps. His preserved equipment shows carefully selected natural materials rather than magical protection. He lived thousands of years after the ice aged people from Ronnies. His clothing illustrates thoughtful material choice instead of serving as ice age proof. Archaeology answers many questions, yet important details remain honestly uncertain. Researchers constantly compare discoveries with experiments to test competing explanations. Every new discovery refines the story, instead of freezing it forever. Now return to the people who once occupied the Rani's cave region. Their survival depended on layering insulation, controlling wind, feeding the body, and planning ahead. None of those ideas seems dramatic until one essential piece suddenly disappears. Winter became survivable because countless practical decisions reinforced one another every single day. The Rani's cave preserves evidence of people who mastered cold through accumulated knowledge. Civilization began with staying warm,